Here we go.
Hello!
Hello!
La la la.
Good evening.
Hi, all. Welcome. It is Monday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and you're somewhere else.
I am somewhere else. I am in Ithaca right now,
Hmm.
um, visiting child number one who did not make it home for spring break. So, you know, when he doesn't come home, I come here. That's what happens. I'm only willing to go so long without seeing my baby.
That's understandable. You have made some interesting stops along the way so far.
Have you been, because I don't check it on social media, but I've been giving you good stuff. So I've crossed off.
Punxsutawney Phil.
Well, I did go see Punxsutawney and went to Gobbler's Knob, which was kind of cool. But more importantly, was that I got to cross off my big bucket list item of going to Falling Water. And for people who don't know, it's a famous Frank Lloyd Wright house that he designed and built, and it is phenomenal. And it's in a place called Mill Run, Pennsylvania, which is like a little over an hour outside of Pittsburgh. And I have been wanting to go to see this since I was 14 years old. So it was when I read The Fountainhead, which is my all-time favorite book, and I became like obsessed with all things Frank Lloyd Wright. And this Falling Water is, I don't know if you put pictures up yet, but it's really
Not
amazing.
yet, but I will. You've got to space it out.
You got to space it out. And then I geeked out even more and went to the Cathedral of Learning at UPitt and went to the Nationality Rooms. And then I went to the Corning Glass Museum today.
Yeah.
It's been like a whole geekdom trip.
Well, we can talk more about that with our wonderful guest who is coming on, and he's a labor guy, so you know how we feel about that. Uh, a good friend of mine who has been in politics for a while is stepping down as committee chair in Broward County. And for those of you who are constantly harping on politics not making a difference or wondering what area to get involved in that actually makes a difference, well, we always say that when it's local, it is the most impactful. And of course, it doesn't get more local in terms of impact than the committee chair of a given county. And Lord knows in Broward County, it is pretty significant. So we are very pleased to welcome back to our podcast a guest you have, for those of you who've been watching for a while, have seen before. He's a member of the Teamsters Local 769, and he is somebody that, without being biased, are absolutely supporting to be the next committee chair of Broward County in the Democratic Party. Andy Madtes, welcome back to Generational Change.
Thank you. Sorry about the lighting, guys. I don't have a studio in my home, and my wife and kids said you're doing this outside.
Oh, it's so sad. You're like a shadow man.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
As long
That's
as people
okay.
can hear me, which is what matters the most, right?
The audio
Yes,
is
it
good.
is.
Audio's solid.
All
Yeah,
right.
no, it's all
Thank you.
good.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear about your geekdom day today.
Oh, I'm just like, I am really the biggest nerd when I like travel. I really am. Like I do some, like I'm sitting there looking at like ancient glass works and like it was great. I don't have anyone to ever go with to these things. That's why I'm always by myself.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it at this most important moment.
Yeah, I think this is important. It's something that we've always talked about on this show, not just the importance of labor, but the fact that our party will only get anywhere when we start being the party of labor again. In fact, the only party that will get anywhere is whichever party is that. So the importance of merging or incorporating labor back into the Democratic Party obviously would make the most sense if they want to get anywhere. And you, of course, represent somebody that would do that. Like that's one of the things I think is really important, that this position would actually be somebody that represents labor. I think that's huge. So I appreciate that. But talk a little bit about like why you're wanting this and what you envision to be able to do with the county party.
Well, thank you for the question, Jen. And again, thank you, Peter, for having me on. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
support and this opportunity. Well, look, I mean, I've been a union organizer now for about 30 years, and I've held probably every level position in the labor movement, from president to an executive director to an organizer to business agent to a political director. And I think it's not just about the moment that we're in, right? We all know that there are problems with the Democratic Party right now in the state of Florida. And, there's no sense on pointing fingers at who's to blame and whose fault it is. That serves no purpose, right? We need to figure out what we need to do moving forward. Yeah. And I know that there are so many committed Democrats out there who just want to start winning again and getting the right people elected. I firmly believe that I'm uniquely fit for this position because of the organizing experience that I bring. I really feel very strongly that, one of the main jobs of a committee man is to look at working with the clubs and caucuses. And as far as I'm concerned, they are the backbone of the local party. And that's statewide. If you can't build a good club and caucus, a strong, vibrant club and caucus structure, you're not going to be able to move forward. And I just think at this moment, Ken has served this party so well for so many years, such a committed guy. I don't think anybody has an understanding of the time that he's taken out of his life over the last 10 years to try to make the Democratic Party better. And I just want to see that continue. I want to fight hard for Democrats. I want to fight to build and build capacity countywide and work with the state and our newly elected statewide chair, Nikki Fried. And I'm running because I believe that I can really make a change working with people. I love working with people. I love talking to people. As you guys know, I never could shut up sometimes. And I just, even just the last few days, just talking to Democrats and making phone calls and trying to gain support. It's really a joy talking to a lot of people. Some people don't want to hear from me and they're just like, no, thank you, and hang up. But, that's to be expected. But no, I'm running because we have to continue to try to move this party forward. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of commitment. I'm ready to do it.
Can you talk about the importance of having a labor leader in a position of influence, especially at the county level, where it seems that that's sort of been lost on a lot of people for a while, and seeing, just all of the efforts that have been made. We've seen multiple efforts made locally with a couple of Starbucks where the attempt at unionization is just getting greater by the day. We're seeing that obviously there's a lot of distractions all the time, constantly with our governor. But as we've talked about, I think that the biggest issue with our governor is the fact that our state has basically become unlivable for the average person in terms of cost of living, in terms of how much they can expect to make at their job. Having a robust labor movement, especially in a state like ours, which has right to work laws, I think would be tremendously powerful. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the unique thing about working in the labor movement for as long as I have is you deal with all facets of, different situations, whether it's collective bargaining, organizing, politics, trying to get the right people elected who support working class people and their values. And, I'm sorry to say that I don't want to make this specific just for Broward or Florida, but nationwide, we've lost the working class. I mean, Donald Trump got elected because of working class people. We have a number of our members who have voted for Ron DeSantis, and here he goes this week putting a bill forward that is basically going to cripple organized labor.
Yep.
Cripple it. SB 256 and House Bill 1445 are going to make it very hard for people who have unions in the public sector to try to remain union and keep their contract, to keep their way of living. I, though, believe that, look, the party is more than just labor, but there's so many issues. We're such a big tent, but I really believe that when you think about it, it goes back to 1991 when James Carville said, it's all about the economy, stupid. People really genuinely care. It doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, brown, black, gay, straight, whatever religion you are. People care about making a living. People want to know that they could get up in the morning, make a livable wage. They want a retirement. They want a roof over their head. They want to put their kids in good schools. We all want this, right? And there are a multitude of different issues that impact us all in so many different ways. But, the singular issue that I think brings us all together is that kitchen table, right? We just want to know that we can take care of our families. We need a little relief. And if you look at what's going on right now, there is absolutely no discussion about any economic policy in this state whatsoever. They are trying to make this state a have and have not state. with the bills that they're putting forward now. There's all kinds of economic issues that are facing people right now. And I think, having been in organized labor, having a lot of contacts with organized labor, and having raised a lot of money for the party over the last 20 years, whether it was directly to candidates or to the state party itself, I like to see that happen again, because labor has stopped investing in the Democratic Party in Florida because they felt that it wasn't going in the direction that it needed. They started putting money into 501c3s, and there went the fracture, that between labor and the Democratic Party, then the 501c3s. And we have to get them, labor, believing on a national level that Florida is still in play and that it's an investment worth making, especially for working men and women throughout this state.
Yeah, we're looking at such a problem nationally, and I wish that I could say that the party of Democrats was that of labor, but we recently saw Joe Biden basically screw the railroad workers at a level that we really haven't seen a president screw labor since Reagan. And it's very hard for me to then be out, in any capacity trying to reason people that somehow the Democrats are better for labor. In what way would that be?
Well, I mean, look, let me, I'm a Joe Biden fan. I'm going to say right off the top, not all politicians can, serve all the needs of all their constituents and all people. But I will say this, Joe Biden, I don't think that anybody realizes this. He signed off on a significant bill that basically saved the retirement of hundreds of thousands of workers throughout this country. There were pension plans that were in deep trouble, and part of the Recovery Act incorporated into that was money to make sure that these pensions were made solvent. Yes, I understand what happened with the railroad, a very complicated situation. And I actually was with some of the railroad guys up in Tallahassee. They're working their way through it. But I have to defend our president, because I really believe that, he's done some things that have really, really helped working people. He's put the right people in the right places. But, I will say that, I hope that at some point there will be a moment in which we will have better laws that will help labor unions. And right now we just don't. But, I think that, there's still a lot of work to do. We get promises made all the time, and sometimes some of them come through and some of them don't. So
Yeah,
the best way I can answer that.
I mean, we were really hoping to see the PRO Act. I know that that was one of the things that Joe obviously campaigned on, and then that sort of just fell by the wayside. And I think that specifically for states like Florida that are right to work states, until we deal with that, it's sort of like just this, it's just an impossible task to deal with. And it's even harder when you have the federal government on top of the state government and nobody is helping labor. It's just really sad to me. And we really need an act like the PRO Act.
I agree with you. And we also had the Employee Free Choice Act many years back. We had the trifecta in the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and we still couldn't get that passed. Even during the Carter administration, we had the trifecta of Democrats in the House, Senate, and in the White House. There was no meaningful labor reforms or legislation that helped that helped unions have a smoother path towards organizing. But again, it goes back to the fact that we have got to reach out and continue to do what we're doing, this youth movement of these organizing drives that are going on without unions. They're just spontaneous strikes that are happening and people pushing back. It has to come from the people. It has to come from the ground up. There'll never be a top-down solution. I just don't believe there ever will be. It has to come from the ground up, just like trying to rebuild our party here in Florida. It has to come from the ground up. Organizing happens that way. It doesn't happen from the top down.
Definitely agree on that point. Would like to hear, and please explain to the audience exactly what your role as the committee chairman would be. What does that role entail, and how do you see using that as a vessel to try to grow, the party structure as we go forward?
Wow, that's a really good question, and I'm going to try to be as concise and short as possible because there's a lot to answer there. But look, I mean, one of the primary responsibilities of a committee chair is it's clubs and caucuses, right? You are in charge of registering the clubs and caucuses. You are responsible for working with the clubs and caucuses, trying to fulfill their needs, their needs for resources, supporting them during the campaign time to make sure that they have the best tools available to maximize the votes in their area. So to me, the clubs and caucus piece is what is attracting me the most to wanting to do this, because it's organizing starts from the bottom and it goes to the top, not the other way around. Obviously, Broward does carry a lot of votes, which is a big responsibility to the state. We are one of the biggest counties, Democratic counties in the state. So we have a lot of votes. That's something that means a lot. I mean, we do have a lot of leverage that we could use, and especially when it comes to picking our state chair. And I'm happy that Nikki Fried was elected. I think she's going to do a marvelous job. And it's a big responsibility, but it's not my votes. It's the Democrats' votes in Broward County. It's their votes. And as I stated in the letter that I sent out to all the Democrats announcing my candidacy, we're not going to operate, as far as I'm concerned, not that this has ever happened before, but I just want to make it clear, there are no silos here. These are your votes, and we have to deliberate on how we deliver those votes to make sure that we're putting the best people in the best positions in the state party and beyond. Now, and if I could just, if you give me 1 second too, I'd just like to elaborate a little more. Sure. So look, organizing is hard work, very, very hard work, especially if you want to do it the right way and you want to maximize, your ability to be able to turn out votes. To me, this is all, the party exists to turn people out to vote, right? We get caught up in a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues that we have to be out front on and, we have to push back on. I get that. But at the end of the day, we are judged by our ability to turn people out to vote. End of story, period. Okay? When you're organizing a hotel or you're organizing a manufacturing plant, as an organizer, do you win or do you lose? Right? That's how it's measured. And the organizing that we have to embark on is going to have to be taken to another level. And the clubs and caucuses, the precinct captains, they can't do it on their own. I always talk, people talk about micromanaging. I talk about macro organizing. It's being able to look at this county and seeing exactly where we are not turning people out. Everybody having an understanding of what role that they're playing in their areas to try to maximize and get people out to vote that are not coming out to vote. We have a huge challenge ahead of us right now. I don't know if you're aware of this, but everybody has to re-up on their absentee ballots.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people don't know that. And if we got to get our arms around that and make sure that we build that capacity to make sure people are going out there and getting their absentee ballots, and then obviously making sure that they send them in, because God knows when you look at the numbers after an election and you see 100,000 Democrats left ballots on their kitchen table, it becomes somewhat frustrating because of, at least in elections in the past, they were so razor thin that they couldn't make such a difference. But we have got to get down to a level where we are really focusing on every precinct in this county and understanding where we're turning people out, where we're not turning people out, and what tools do the clubs, the caucuses, and the precinct captains need to be successful. Okay? Everybody has a different approach on how they want to go and approach elections. We got to start singing from the same hymn book, right? We can't be like, all over the place and not mobilizing and being held accountable, for the work that we're doing. I mean, yes, this is mostly volunteer work. This is not a paid position. Matter of fact, Ken Evans told me this job is going to cost you money. I haven't told my wife that yet, but it's going to take a very high level of organizing to get us back to where we need. And then there's the resource question. You can have it. You're only going to get so many volunteers. But the bottom line is it does cost money to run elections and to turn people out to vote. And we have got to figure out a way. Look, we're never going to raise millions and millions of dollars, but we do have to get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, at least in the county, if we're going to be able to give the resources back to the clubs and caucuses that they need to be able to do the job that they need to do to turn people out to vote. I know that was a lot.
No, it is. And we talked about this. Like, for me, the biggest party hindrance in terms of turning out people and raising money is they're not offering anything. And I've said it a million times, like if you give people something exciting to vote for, they'll vote, because you can register all the voters in the world. But unless you give them something to vote for, and something like, and especially have a platform that's worth donating to. And this is something that I think is where they're fundamentally falling short in the party, is that they don't seem to really stand for anything. And they're not really out in the community other than registering people to vote blue.
You know, I think that, look, we have a bunch of different messages we could deliver to voters, right? The question is what message. But at the end of the day, and I said it in my remarks when I sent my letter out announcing my candidacy, this is a great party. I'm in this party because this is the party that gave us Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, civil rights, marriage equality, FMLA, Affordable Care Act. I mean, you think about the history of this party and the legislation and the policies they passed, what a net it cast across this country that helped so many people, millions of people who don't even vote for this party, people who are not even members of this party are benefiting from these tremendous policies. And just in this last 2 years, what some of the important legislation that Biden has passed, it's having a really big impact. But the question is it so much about messaging, or is it about a megaphone, right? Do we have a big enough megaphone to get our message out and tailor our message? So yeah, you're right. People have to want to have a reason to vote.
Yeah.
And, you know, in this last election, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it here, Charlie Crist was not our guy. He was just not going to move people and excite people. I was knocking on doors, and I had people saying, no, I'm not voting for him. I'm staying home. I'm telling you, I knocked on hundreds of doors, and I was hearing, I knew even in 2016 when I was out there knocking for Hillary, I could feel it. You know, the best poll in the world is go knock on 100 doors for a candidate. You'll walk away from that day of knocking on doors, and you will have a very good vibe as to what's going on, and people were not moved by him.
I agree.
We saw the same thing. I called it from the very beginning. I said, if he comes within 20 points, it'll be impressive to me. I actually thought it would be more than 20. Yeah, you know, it really represents, what he represents is they've run out of ideas and literally are recirculating old ideas that didn't work well the first time. And that's just not inspired, right? Like nobody's excited to come out and vote for that. Nobody.
And I think it comes down to, you know, is there again, the message of labor, in our opinion, is the winning message, because I think most people can identify with that economic message that really matters and is just too obvious to ignore, especially here in Florida. And the ability to turn over a new leaf and try something different. I agree with you. I think, you know, regarding Nikki, I think that she needs to be given a fair shake. This is a position that she has taken on that requires a lot of work. You know, it's very thankless in a lot of ways. But considering where we've been over the past several years, you know, I hate to say it, but the only place we can go is up. And we would love to see more individuals like yourself being in positions of power that are actually looking out for working people. And if the Democratic Party gets back to that, even in a state like Florida, where a lot of people have just kind of let it go, which is a huge mistake because you're talking about 30 electoral votes. You cannot just let that go, because what that ends up doing, as you know, is it allows the GOP to create stronger infrastructure in states like Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. And if you can let them get away with that, that's where you really put the next presidential election in great jeopardy. So I do think it puts us in a position where having somebody like yourself in that position could really, you know, create the necessary spark at the local level that we need. And hopefully other counties will be able to copy that, if you will. So when is the election? And if anybody wants to support your efforts in this, especially if they're local, how can they get involved?
Sure. So the election is on April 15th. It's going to be held out in off of Flamingo at Sun. I just got the notice today about where it's being held, but it is April 15th. I think the notice went out this morning. I've been working all day, so I'll take a look at exactly where it is. But if anybody, you know, look, my cell phone 786-213-3702. I give my cell phone out to all my members, and I'm giving it out to all the people, the precinct captains who I'm asking to support me. So if anybody wants to call me directly, they can. Working on getting the website up right now. where I'm going to post like a plan so people could go to it and see an actual plan with details. This is not just a bunch of rhetoric. This is going to be, take it very seriously, because if you want to earn the votes of Democrats, you got to show them that you have a plan and that you're committed to doing the work, because it's work, right? So, you have your day job, and then you're going to roll right into going to clubs and caucuses after you get off of work, because that's your job. You got to be there. So anybody wants to reach out to me, they're more than happy to call me on my cell.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think that you are somebody that is going to be inspired for them, I think. And I do like Ken, but I think that it's time to sort of shift things up a little bit. I think that this is a good direction. And I think the fact that you have organizing background is key. Like, I think that's huge. And that is right now what they really need very badly there. And so if there's anybody that I can call or speak to that is on that list, Peter will let me know, right? You'll tell me if there's someone that I could call on your behalf. Because unfortunately for people watching, this is it's a very closed group election. It's not like anybody can just go by in Broward and just cast a vote, say, I like this guy, so I'm on team, I'm going to go vote for him. It doesn't work that way.
We've got the list. We're going to be hammering that phone away. Obviously, the election's in a few weeks, but people are going to start really paying attention. And we'll definitely be there. And Andy, thank you for all that you do. Again, labor has become so thankless in this country, but it does not go unnoticed by us.
I so appreciate that. Thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll be right there with you all the way to the finish line. Hopefully we get you in there and start building the party through labor, which is what needs to happen. And we definitely will be in touch.
I appreciate it. Labor did build the middle class in this country, as my dad always used to say.
Well, we need them to bring it back.
That's absolutely right. We're going to continue to do that, and I'm looking forward to it. And I can't thank the two of you enough for having me on and your support. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Andy. Next time we're going to get you indoors with lighting so people see that you're not just a shadow head, okay?
I gotcha. No problem.
Okay, bye, Andy.
All right, bye-bye.
Well, we're definitely pulling for him. And, we're not even going to comment on who else is at that point. It's just clear as day that this is the direction that if the party is serious about making any type of wholesale changes, they'll recognize that this is the person who, in terms of the local level, in terms of being able to make very important decisions regarding, how you convince people to get out to the polls, how you convince people to get involved in clubs, is that you have to be able to create boots on the ground who are fighting for living wage, for think of universal health care, any type of labor benefits that would inspire.
He's not in the witness protection program. Peter, do you want to reboot? Because have you reboot when you walked in today? Did you reboot?
Yeah.
You started up. Okay.
What's the problem?
Well, I just keep seeing that you're having like the bars that show that you're having
no connection issue on the sun. It's fine. It's been fine.
I've noticed the bars all night.
It's probably your end. You've frozen up a couple of times, but it's not showing up on my end.
Okay.
I haven't
That's
had
fine then, as long as it's not on your end. I thought it was.
No, everything's fine over here.
Okay.
And again,
and for people, I understand that the idea of local committee politics in Broward is really not very sexy. It really isn't. But these changes, while they might seem small, can actually be kind of big. Like the two people that are kind of running for this seat are pretty different in terms of, what that represents. And Andy brings this sort of the approach that we're trying to bring back, which is getting back to labor. And the other person would just be sort of more of how it's been, and sort of sticking with the status quo. So for us, the difference would be, I think, pretty noticeable.
Well, I just think it's pretty clear as day that somebody like Andy will at least have a puncher's chance of inspiring some people to say, yeah, this is where the fight is going to happen for labor. You're not going to get that with, more of the same, if you will, or believing that, it's the labor approach versus the Chamber of Commerce approach. You have to be realistic about which version is going to be the future of the Democratic Party. Well, we've seen what the Chamber of Commerce version of the party has been over the past several years.
Can you explain to me when it was that the Democratic Party was sort of hand in hand with the Chamber of Commerce? Like, when did that happen?
Well, basically, when Bill Clinton decided that we're going to be funded by Wall Street instead of unions.
Right. Well,
and that was, go to these meetings, meet with the investment bankers. They're the ones who are definitely on board with what labor needs. I participate in the capitalist system. I'm in commercial real estate, but I'm not stupid. The whole system is broken, and the system for labor is irreparably broken. It's almost unconscionable how bad this has gotten. Now, do I think that Andy made some points regarding Biden that are probably correct? Yes, but on the margins. We are in a situation right now as a nation where we can't have these marginal shifts in a positive direction, because the reality is you can make a positive shift in one direction and the bad stuff that comes with it just completely washes it away. And we keep falling down the mountain. And that's ostensibly what we're facing with right now. And I understand that he has to, you got to do what you got to do, especially, with what certain, unions have to say. But the truth is, we're in a situation where status quo is the worst thing that we could be dealing with right now. What we need is a real robust labor movement. And
isn't it common sense? Like, I look at our party at the county level and I think they all just got their asses handed to them. And instead of them coming together to kind of figure out what they could do differently, they haven't done that. In fact, apparently our congresswoman called the whole big meeting basically to tell everyone who was to blame for it, and none of it involved her.
Yeah, but that's a bad example because we know how bad our congresswoman is. That's a totally different thing.
Well, it's like they still can't figure it out. But I can tell you this, if it's really bad, then maybe doing what you've always been doing isn't the way to keep going. And in terms of like the committee person, again, maybe we should try something different. Maybe we should go back with labor. Just saying.
I would agree. And we will find out from the head of the party next Monday, because one of our guests next Monday is actually going to be Nikki Fried. So we will see if that holds. Hopefully it will. Maybe she saw this interview tonight and decided, yeah, I definitely got to get on there. They're definitely talking about some
my thoughts on that, on why she wants to come on, but that's neither here nor there.
Yes. So we are waiting for one of our guests right now.
So it is the anniversary. I hate to say that. It's not an anniversaries are things that are like celebratory. I almost feel like it's like a memoriam.
Well, considering that this was a war that should have never happened, and frankly, it's not a war, it's an invasion, because that's what we did, could learn a lot about...
Can we talk about what wars were supposed to happen? What wars were good to happen?
Well...
Were there good wars?
Sure.
Is that a thing?
Sure. There are wars throughout history.
I'm against
you can say what you want, but the American Revolution was necessary. You could say that the Civil War was unnecessary, but there was no other way that one element of how our economy was grown during the first, I guess, in terms of the nation, within the first 75 years, you would say, of the nation being formed, you could not deny that you couldn't have this idea that this is the land of the free, home of the brave, and have slavery. Like, there's no justification to that. And while we
still have that.
Yes, we have labor.
We still have slavery.
We have it right now. And you see,
I know.
And people
so again, I don't,
which is just silly. So we'll give it a few more minutes. Greg, we appreciate you getting in here. We are just waiting for Mrs. Rowley. Hopefully she will be joining us in a minute. But yeah, this is not a time to celebrate. That much I can say.
I just feel so angry. I have so much anger about it. And I remember feeling angry at the time. I remember at the time thinking, yeah, this is a bunch of bullshit. This is manufacturing consent 101. I can't believe we're falling for this again. And yet here we are talking about this 20 years later while people are still doing it with the war in Ukraine. Like, I'm so glad I went to Punxsutawney. I feel like my life is Groundhog Day.
I was going to say.
I really do.
It's stuck in a time warp.
Like, how many more reasons? I mean, it's just crazy. And people keep falling for it every single time. I can't tell you today when I was now granted, this is the Finger Lakes region of New York. It's pretty very, East Coast liberal vibe.
What are the
but there were very many Ukrainian flags that I did see today.
And again, well, hang on one second. Of course, because no one follows instruction.
I told you to stop sending that Google invite to people.
That was not because that was because of that had more to do with Emily just setting this up. So forgive me for that. I am not as guilty as I look. So yeah, just give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
We have a new El Nino coming. There's always an El Nino. We're in crisis. But sure, keep building stuff down there in Florida on our sinking peninsula. Sure, keep piling more and more concrete when we're running out of clean water. I'm sure you guys will figure it out down there.
Well, here's the thing, and this is actually very interesting. Danny, thank you so much. We love you, brother.
We need to really start promoting scuba certification. I have mine. I highly recommend people get scuba certified.
I would like to get scuba certified.
You ought to be, because if you plan on living south of Lake Okeechobee, you're going to need to have a regulator. So I honestly don't know how people think this is going to just keep going like this.
You know, it's funny. We couldn't have picked a better night to do this because for those of you who do not pay attention to corporate media, I occasionally will, flip through it for about a minute. So while everyone is distracted, because this is exactly what's going to happen tomorrow if they indict Trump, it is nothing but a distraction. In the meantime, the two other most powerful men walking the earth, the president of China and the president of Russia, decided to meet today and talk about how they are going to form a global alliance, most likely against the West. So
why would anybody ever think to do that? We're so benevolent.
Listen, I can't wait to talk to Greg about this one. Maybe blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline was not the smartest move in the book. I'm just thinking maybe it wasn't such a smart move. And we've gotten away with so much for so long, and it's all about money and power. Everyone thinks that there's something more to it than the trillions of dollars in natural resources. The fact that, our currency is the one that's traded. Double K, we love you. We love all of you guys.
We're bringing democracy to those poor nations.
We have to bring them freedom. We've got to free these people so they can use our resources. That's the key.
There we go.
So Greg gets first dibs since he was here.
Of course.
Well, of course. I mean, we have to be very gentlemanly or ladylike, of course.
Well, we're going to just be, first come, first serve.
Well, we can certainly do that. He is the professor of history and the USS Midway Chair in Modern U.S. Military History at San Diego State. So we're definitely going to be learning a thing or two here, I have no doubt. Greg Daddis, welcome to Generational Change. You are on mute, my friend.
Of course I am, because it only took me 3 years of teaching on Zoom to figure this out. So,
well, when you want to badmouth the students that are not doing a good job, it's like, but they can't hear what you're saying.
Right, that's right.
There you go.
No, for some of us people that were not born with computers and like tablets like in front of us, the COVID shutdown was quite the rude awakening technologically.
Yeah, it was. Although I do give the students an immense amount of credit. They, I arrived here at San Diego State in June of 2020. So my first year teaching here at SDSU was entirely online, and they were phenomenal. They were still keeping up with the reading and the assignments, and got as much out of the course as they could. They deserve a lot of credit for kind of working through it.
Well, you're not alone. You are going to be accompanied by another lovely individual. Colleen Rowley is an American former FBI agent and whistleblower, and this is something I'm really interested in talking with her about. She was a Democratic Farmer Labor Party candidate for Congress in Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. So we definitely support the farmers and, of course, everything.
I didn't know that was a party.
Oh, Minnesota has Minnesota.
I know they elected Jesse.
Minnesota elected me governor, so of course I'm excited to speak with Colleen. She's welcome on our show anytime. And of course, Minnesota has the distinction of being the only state in the union that did not vote for Reagan. So without further ado, Colleen Rowley, welcome to Generational Change.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Yes, we like our cheesehead friends. We have a lot of cheesehead friends that come on.
She is in Minnesota. She is a Minnesota Vikings fan.
Yeah, the cheese thing is in Wisconsin, just next door.
Okay, I'm sorry. I keep thinking, like, to me, it's like the Midwest. It's a cold tundra.
It's the upper Midwest. So I think it would be the perfect place to start. Let's be honest. And of course, it's not going to get anywhere near the airplay that it deserves, but this is very significant. President Xi and President Putin obviously met today, and this has serious ramifications for global politics in the midst of a very dangerous war that can, end up very much like Iraq in the fact that it could be decades long, trillions of dollars turned over, and all the while we're pillaging the hell out of the world. What do you guys take away from the meeting between these two world leaders that just took place?
Why don't you go ahead, Gregory?
Well, for me, I think it's it's what we've seen quite often in history as kind of phenomenon of blowback, right? That as Americans over time have flexed their military muscle, there's always consequences for that. And you see kind of bandwagoning on the other side to balance against American aggression and American use of military force. And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing now is a concern that the United States is using Ukraine as a pretext to increase its hegemonic power in Europe, both Western and Eastern, but also concerns on China of Western incursions into Asia as we've kind of been on this long pivot since the Obama administration to Asia. Which, in one sense should not be surprising. This is how power politics works, that regional hegemons often inspire a response. And we shouldn't be surprised by what we're seeing right now, because I think it fits a fairly typical mold that you saw throughout the Cold War era and continuing on today of just elements trying to band together to react to the flexing of American military might abroad.
And I think you can actually go back to the Iraq War and even Afghanistan, and then the series of Mideast wars, which actually already, decade ago plus, started to push China and Russia closer together. This just didn't happen overnight, and it didn't even happen with the so-called announced pivot, nor any of the Pentagon's, I forget what they're called. Gregory can probably say it better, but there are all these plans where they label China as the number one enemy and Russia. Now, if you start labeling and saying, these are our number one adversaries and that we have to go against them, what are you going to do? You're going to force them, even though at the start of this, they weren't particularly close. China and Russia were not particularly close. They are now. Obviously, they are now because they've seen themselves as number one and number two enemies. And so, again, this is kind of like what Kissinger used to teach about, triangulate, whatever he was teaching, all those power politics. But when you make enemies, and by the way, it's not just Russia and China. They now have the BRICS, and they say it's 80% of the world's population that have loosely, not joined in military alliance, but they've loosely, more or less aligned more so with Russia and China than with the United States and NATO. So it's even more than just Russia and China. So India, for instance, South Africa, even Saudi Arabia. They are now kind of walking the fence, and they refuse to really align closely with, and some of these we thought they were our allies. So this whole world geopolitics thing has changed a lot. And I would attribute it to the series of really horribly stupid wars that began with 9/11. For obviously, first of all, Afghanistan, Iraq, they didn't even turn out well for the United States interests. And then bombing Libya, the intervention in Syria. I mean, they decided to go military instead of trying to use perhaps other softer power. And when they put all the eggs in the basket of using military might, they now have created an alignment of other powers, and of course the real problem here is these are nuclear superpowers.
Oh yeah.
The two nuclear superpowers, and they're now closely aligned against the United States and NATO.
Yeah, we're literally living through 1984. Like, this is exactly what the book was about, which was written basically at the conclusion of World War II to basically say the world will be run by these three countries and everything in between is just a proxy. We're 80 years later and there is no difference whatsoever. How much do you, I mean, again, it's all speculation. We know what the obvious answer is, even if you can't prove it at the moment. But how much is the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, do you think, plays a role in these two superpowers coming together right now?
I'm not so certain it's one specific event. I think it's just, again, it's, whether we like it or not, power matters on the global stage. And here is an opportunity for two states to come together and use whatever pretext it may be to band together and find an opportunity to gain an advantage against the United States. I think we're all still dealing with the kind of end of the Cold War moment where nations like China and Russia are still kind of coming to grips with the end of the Cold War and what it means for the United States to be arguably the world superpower. That superpower obviously has come with a cost, since most of our foreign policy has been militarized for quite some time. So I'm not sure we can kind of put this on one specific event. I think this is just two opportunistic states that are finding a chance for to gain an advantage against the United States by combining forces.
I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, when you're the world bully for as long as we've been the world bully, why wouldn't all of them come together? I mean, to me, it's just common sense. Why would we blame them for doing that? I mean, it's like, I still have yet to have somebody tell me why we're scared of Russia. I really don't understand it. They have 8 military bases, an economy the size of Spain's, and are we thinking they're going to come up on the shores?
I think the answer partially the answer to that question, Jen, is that, we need enemies. I mean, whether you like it or not, we defined ourselves as Americans in the Cold War era as what we weren't. We defined ourselves as Americans that we weren't communists. We weren't godless. We weren't, socialist. And when that enemy went away, I think we kind of spent much of the 1990s in this period of drift, where it was more difficult for us to define what it meant to be an American. So, there's clear advantages to having an enemy. You as a politician can burnish your credentials.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not a politician.
I know. But you know what I'm saying, right? I know, but you know what I'm saying.
I do. We always like an enemy, but what I'm saying is it's like, I'd rather have one that it makes more reason. It's sort of like they're nowhere near us in terms of power, economically or military. So what is it that we're like, this big red McCarthy is boogeyman? Like, I'm so over it at this point. And you know what? We should do better. We should demand better. I think it's pathetic that we can only say what we are by saying what we're not. What are we?
I agree, but again, I think what you have to consider is that I think you're exactly right, but there are clear benefits to creating an enemy and elevating the threat. There's a political advantage, as I just mentioned. I know you're not a politician, but you gain, if you are a politician, you gain credibility by defending the nation. Right. Clearly, if you are part of the military-industrial complex, you need an enemy to ensure that you're still getting paid by the government for large contracts. Again, culturally, I think we define who we are by what we're not. So there's a lot of incentives, I think, embedded in our system, politically, culturally, economically, where you need to elevate the threat. Now, I think you're 100% right. We need to kind of push back against that longstanding assumption that we've had, because it leads us to a militarization of foreign policy and an unthinking embracing of war, which has clearly come with consequences, especially over the last 20 years.
Our nation, please, Colleen.
To go back to the Nord Stream, I think the fear and the reason why that was sabotaged is there was a fear, and not obviously the American people, but the Biden administration and the neoconservative war hawks that surround Biden actually were afraid of the power of Russia's oil and the fact that that could then be used. They called it the weaponization, leverage that would be played over the Germany for sure, and actually the rest of Europe. So there was this fear that power or, money, wealth of the oil flowing into Germany would then have an impact on Germany. Not on it doesn't have an impact, I don't think much. I think that was long in the coming with China and Russia aligning together. But the fear was that Germany would not stay with us. They, NATO, they would have an incentive because they're dependent upon oil. So if there was a fear, and the reason why Biden, now here's the perniciousness of bombing a pipeline, that kind of sabotage, and this is why the U.S. administration has denied it. They have to deny it because that sets a precedent that kind of horrible sabotage is okay. So if we claim to be the sole unipolar power, and we commit this really reckless sabotage, then all bets are off. Any country in the world can do this now because we have just led the way. It set a terrible precedent. So, I think there's really, really problematic. I know here in America, that pipeline is clear over and, across the world, and people don't care so much, but the people in Europe care. And again, this sets a really bad precedent, because I wouldn't be surprised now if, terrorism is the use of, what do they call it? It's when you don't have military power. So Al-Qaeda did not have an army or a military power. What could they do? They had to be a guerrilla. Even the American revolutionaries were like this. Okay, so they had to use real, unusual, more or less guerrilla tactics. And so, you don't want to set that kind of precedent, because then if you are the powerful military, you are opening the door to this kind of sabotage, even on your own infrastructure. That was a really dumb thing, really, really dumb, and really desperate for the Biden administration to order sabotage of our allies' pipeline. Really bad. Again, I don't think it had a whole lot to do with pushing China. Maybe it just doubly confirms China and Russia saying, hey, we got to stick together here.
Don't they? I would.
I think that we've got to a point where it's like the poking of the bear. It's like people want to pretend like they don't want to ask questions as to why Putin did what he did and what were the succession of events that led up to this, even though what he did was wrong, but not looking at it from a geopolitical perspective of, well, what actually got us to this point? NATO's infringement is what allowed this to ultimately happen. And as far as the U.S. is concerned, and this is the scariest part of all, they consider Ukraine to be a casualty of war. And that is the most dangerous thing that is happening right now. When I see people constantly saying, let's let this war keep going on, I'm thinking, did I just not live through Iraq and everything else that happened? And the fact that Obama still hasn't been, let's be honest, been brought to at least some form of justice, even though you could blame Hillary all you want, regarding what happened in Libya, what is happening right now in Syria, and especially what is happening in Yemen. To me, I can still remember being 19 and sitting in a politics class in college and listening to fellow students of my age saying, we have to go into Iraq to give them freedom. It's like they were taught so well, so quickly. And even at 19, I'm like, are people this mental? Like, do they not see the scam that's being run on them right now? I know a lot of people hate Donald Trump, and I get it. But there is no president in my lifetime who is worse than George W. Bush, and it's not close. Like, the things that this man did, and frankly, the things that Dick Cheney and
I was
everyone
going to
around
say it really wasn't him. Let's be real.
he, with all due respect, he was the village idiot that they got to throw in there and basically just, do as he was told. But I'm thinking how we can look back in 20 years at what happened, seeing all the things that led up to going into Iraq, the fact that almost everybody with a clear conscience, even though we wanted blood and retribution for 9/11, that people recognize that, yeah, this doesn't seem right. Why are we going after Saddam Hussein and not Osama bin Laden? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about how a lot of these things have come full circle, because I can remember very, very well what it was like leading up to the spring of 2003 and us going into Iraq and thinking, this is going to be a nightmare of proportions I don't think people fully understand, and how it would reverberate over years. And even I couldn't have imagined that it would last for 2 decades. And now we're in a situation where we're looking at potentially another war in Eastern Europe that could very well have similar implications in terms of destruction and length of time in terms of that destruction. Your thoughts?
I would suggest one of the deeper questions that all Americans should be asking is, what assumptions are we making when we decide to go to war? It's a lesson that we see coming out of Putin's most recent decision with Ukraine. Clearly, he made quite a number of assumptions that did not play out. We obviously did the same thing in Iraq and Afghanistan. I would argue, as a historian of the American war in Vietnam, we did the same thing in Vietnam. So I think it's important for these moments in time where we do reflect back on anniversaries. And I agree, Jen, that might not be the most correct word to be using here. But in these moments of time where we do kind of reflect back on the past, what we should be doing is asking far deeper, more thoughtful questions about our assumptions in war. We place so much faith in what war will provide us, and the historical record just doesn't support those assumptions and that faith. And I think it's important for us to be able to be in a space where we can debate those assumptions in a way that is fruitful. It's clearly very difficult to do now in this hyper-partisan environment where any discussion, any questioning of the use of military force overseas is potentially politically damaging, right? You don't want to be branded as not supporting veterans or, not supporting American security. But we need to have more honest conversations. And I think most importantly, it's about these assumptions that we make. We made plenty of assumptions going into Iraq about, as you mentioned earlier, the freedom that we supposedly would bring to this traditional society. Notice the terminology that was used today as it was back in the 60s in Vietnam. Assumptions about the socially transformative nature of military power, that we could transform societies and political communities abroad through the use of military power. And the assumptions that war would be cheap and quick and not all that costly. When those assumptions don't bear out over and over and over again, I think it's important for us to kind of then step back, especially in moments like this where we're afforded that time and space to do so, to ask some of these deeper questions and not feel that we're going to be pilloried or deemed to be unpatriotic because we're not supporting some larger national security strategy or policy.
Well, I was considered a 9/11 whistleblower, and I testified to the Joint Intelligence Committee inquiry, then the Senate Judiciary Committee, and finally to the Department of Justice Inspector General that did a 2-year-long, 500-page report that confirmed that 9/11 could have been prevented if information had simply been shared inside of agencies, between agencies, and there's examples of this on whatever, and most importantly, with the public. This is not me saying this. This is actually the Joint Intelligence Committees and the 9/11 Commission. This has all been forgotten and swept under the rug. All you had to do, you didn't need to have to go to war. All you had to do was share information. And the CIA didn't tell the FBI 2 of the hijackers were in California. No one told anybody about the terrorist suspect in Minnesota. I mean, so if this had simply been shared, we wouldn't have had a 9/11. But I think a lot of the people in these think tanks, military think tanks, and certainly the neoconservatives, and they had long been thinking how they could maintain this unipolar power after the Cold War ended, wanting an enemy. So these plans, the Project for the New American Century, had said, well, if we just get a new Pearl Harbor, this goes back to the shock doctrine that Naomi Klein wrote about. And actually, Rahm Emanuel said this once. He said, don't ever let a catastrophe go to waste. And so when bad things happen, people in power use those things. They exploit this trauma in order to go to their agenda. And the prior agenda that goes all the way back, even perhaps to the first Bush administration, when they, had the first Gulf War, but then they didn't go all the way. They didn't so-called finish the job. Actually, Dick Cheney gave the reasons why and Colin Powell's doctrine after Vietnam was that, the wars had to be short and they had to have a goal, and he had these conditions. And so, when they had this kind of regret that they had not finished the job in Iraq, and this whole PNAC thing was like, when we get a chance, we're going to finish the job in Iraq. And I think that is simply the reason why they began to engineer these lies. They used Ahmed Shalabi, this Iraqi expat. Now they blame him. He's long dead, so they blame him. Oh, he lied to us. But you can have this blame game that goes on afterwards. But they were using these lies to start the Iraq War. And of course, then and they had a plan. It wasn't just going to be Iraq. It was going to be, Libya and Syria and Yemen and all the other countries. And then finally ending with Iran. Yeah. Now, this isn't real. People look at you. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. No, that's actually that's Wesley Clark that said this.
We had the pleasure of having General Clark on the podcast, and he reiterated.
Good. Because a lot of times people are so ill-informed now that they have forgotten all of this history. And so I think the one thing that Iraq did when they started to really pull out the campaign, the lies of weapons of mass destruction, and Al Qaeda people got Saddam confused with bin Laden. It's completely, they deliberately did this. They said Al Qaeda was in Iraq. Of course, we made later, this whole thing created Al Qaeda in Iraq, and it created ISIS. It actually did. But at the time, it wasn't the case. And I think when they did that, I think the thing that really has changed here, especially since Vietnam, when there was a Vietnam syndrome, and a lot of people, at least for 30, 40 years, understood what Gregory has just mentioned. A lot of people, it was called Vietnam syndrome. And a lot of people understood that war is not the way to, even if you care about your own self-interest, this is not a good way to do it. And this persisted for a long time. With the Iraq War, Karl Rove and some of these others who were part of it all started bragging to each other that we now can make our own reality. We control the media. Look how we pulled it over on the American public. And it was so easy to pull off. The New York Times ran false stories, etc. And I think they actually now got full of themselves. They started to think we can always make our own. Making your own reality, by the way, is lying. It's essentially, falsehoods that you can get people to believe. And they've used it now in all of these wars, and including what we just talked about with Ukraine. They don't go back in the history. They talk about, it's Russia invading last year. No, this goes back to, years before this. And I think that this is the problem. You've got to get people smarter so that they can see through this propaganda. And, like you were saying, people, get so swayed by it. It's amazing how this war fever can take hold. It doesn't seem to last all that long, but for a short while, 70% of the American people believed that Saddam was behind 9/11. Okay, they believed that without a bit of evidence. They believed that Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11. 70% of the American public. I mean, and actually, even a year later, it didn't go down much. So this is the thing we have to really, I think, work on, is how to make people more intelligent about spotting when there are prior agendas and they're using that to get your manufacture the public opinion or this is what there's like different terms for it.
Manufacture consent. Actually, it's make your own reality. That's we get to make our own reality, and you are just left stewing in the aftermath with what and they always go after they're done, when it starts to fail, when a propaganda narrative starts to fail, they switch to a new thing. They get the media. When the Nord Stream pipeline came out that it was Biden who ordered it bombed, all of a sudden, we see the Chinese balloon. Now we see the Chinese balloon. I mean, it almost happened in a day or two. And you can just see how the media, unfortunately, we don't have too many Seymour Hersh's anymore. And a lot of them have been blackballed. Seymour Hersh has been blackballed. And this is a real problem for people now not knowing what to believe, when the New York Times and the Washington Post and their nightly news is telling them these things. They don't know what to think. Well, they're all beating war drums left and right. And anybody who was in mainstream media that spoke out against the war in Iraq lost their job. You had everybody from Phil Donahue, Jesse Ventura. It was bad. They all got let go. And so there's no reason to think they're any different now in terms of who they'll bring on. They're not going to bring on anybody who's going to speak against the war. The closest you get on is Fox with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what's going to happen to Tucker Carlson, because he's starting to go against the grain, and that could be really problematic for him.
Except he's still like number one in the slot. So that's the thing.
Yeah.
But so was Phil Donahue, actually. He was number one in his slot too.
Yeah, he was great. So was Ed Schultz. But the fact is, it's a different time now. No one had ever seen anything like what 9/11 was like. America had never been attacked like that before. The PTSD that a lot of Americans felt as a result of that probably blinded them in many ways, and they just took the State Department's word for it when it came to foreign policy. But I don't think it's like that anymore. I think that, first of all, wars just become so commonplace that I think people are just desensitized to the whole thing. And so now we kind of look forward and think, well, have we really learned anything from Iraq and what that whole experience is like? Well, considering how many other countries we're involved in right now, no, we really haven't. And as General Clark said when he was on our podcast, again, this is all a means to an end for, global power, control of resources, all of that. And it is a scary time because I think our country's getting very restless. We have a lot of problems here on the home front, especially when it comes to income inequality, healthcare, a living wage, labor has been decimated left and right. The environment is completely overrun. We're seeing these superstorms that are appearing. There's flooding in California in places that never seem to have a problem with rain. So there's just a cluster of so many different things. And, it's almost like you're waiting for the bubble to pop. Like, what is it going to be? Because I think a lot of people are on edge regarding our future. But war is hell, and anyone who's ever served in it, as I thankfully have not, but have family and friends that have. And you can tell that they're just never the same. And I'm just wondering, how much further are people going to be okay with these proxy wars going on before they're starting to ask American troops to get involved again? Maybe that's the line. I don't know. But I do think we're at a scary time. And I think our experience in Iraq should have been the final straw. For a lot of people, it has. But clearly for our military-industrial complex, it hasn't. Because as you said, Greg, there's just way too much money involved. There's way too much power involved. You don't get a nearly $1 trillion budget every year suggesting that this type of money needs to be spent on the military when clearly it doesn't.
Yeah, I might push back though and say that we actually have learned some things coming out of Iraq.
Sure.
I think perhaps most importantly, it's to keep the war off the front pages, which is why both the Obama administration and the Trump administration relied so heavily on drones and special forces. That yes, there are financial rewards for large industrial war, but there's also political costs from as you saw with the Bush administration. So, I think we have learned in a sense that the best way to maintain a military component of your foreign policy, which has been integral to, I would argue, U.S. foreign policy since the end of World War II, is to make war invisible. And the problem with that, I think, is that that far too many Americans are okay with that. And I get it, right? I'm going to go to bed a little bit depressed tonight because, you're laying out all these problems. But, for many Americans, clearly, let's be honest, right? The war in Ukraine is not what's most important to them. And that's the challenge, I think, for all of us, is to make Americans who may not feel that foreign policy is important to them to hopefully be in a position of education where you can say, actually, it is important to us, and here's why. And yes, there are domestic concerns that may seem in the short term more compelling to you and more necessary for your attention. But these foreign policy decisions that are being made on your behalf are incredibly important as well. Now, it's hard to do that when you do learn the lesson from Iraq that you have to keep the war off the front pages.
I'll just underline that I think one of the main lessons of the Vietnam War was to end the draft. And the reason the draft was ended was to make the cost of war invisible. Exactly. That's what it did. If we had had a draft, there were a couple of people in Congress who actually, when this lead up was starting, they said, maybe we should have a draft. And of course, they were beaten down. There were 7 of them. Rangel was the leader of it. And he said, we should, if there had been a draft, if they had not ended the draft after Vietnam, I don't think we would have had an Iraq war. I honestly don't. I think the public opinion, but because it was war made easy, it was so easy. Now, here's the other thing. Besides, I wrote an article called Recipe Concocted for Perpetual War. And I think that they came up, this isn't just ending the draft. In other wars, we've had to pay taxes for the trillions. One of our colleagues, Matt Ho, said that just the Afghanistan and Iraq war over by 2050 is going to be $8 trillion of costs. So guess what? That's just tacked on to the national debt. It's like a credit card. They're printing money. And so we're at 32 trillion, around $32 trillion of national debt. When we started with Bush, when the first war started, it was 5 trillion. So we went from about 5 trillion national debt to 32 trillion now. Now, if they were to send a bill to the taxpayers and say, oh, these great wars you've been having that you frankly don't care so much about because you don't even know, we're just going to make you pay 1/100th of the cost so far. So we're sending everybody a bill for $1,000. And you know what? The wars would end tomorrow if a bill came for just a tiny fraction of what they've cost. But we're not paying the cost of the war. Other wars they did. They raised the taxes to pay for them. And then the last thing with our article about Recipe Concocted for Perpetual War is they ended American casualties by relying solely on drone and aerial bombing. And then finally, the use of proxies. I mean, we were using proxy forces and mercenary forces before this, but now there's no real American boots on the ground. And so that even makes it less, you can't even say, like with Iraq, there were, 5,000, 7,000, 4,000 in Afghanistan. That doesn't even exist now. we had Hillary Clinton's legal counsel telling her that the bombing of Libya was not an actual war because it was not, there was no risk to Americans. It was just bombing from the air. So the War Powers Resolution, he said that doesn't apply. This isn't war. And the next question that you should have asked, Harold Koh was his name. Harold Koh told Hillary Clinton, it isn't a war. It's not even a War Powers Resolution. We're just bombing from the air. The next question should have been, well, what is it if it's not a war? Isn't it just then kind of like mass murder? You're just bombing from the air. I mean, honestly, some of these questions can't be faced inside the United States and that's why they did make it invisible. They made it invisible and, off the front pages. Now with Iraq tonight on the nightly news, there was a whole rehabilitation of launching the invasion. The main newscaster went to the place where they pulled down the Saddam, that statute that they pulled down, and he was reveling in how great this was and how it changed everything, the ousting of Saddam. Now young girls have rights in Iraq. They never had rights before, but this has all turned out so well. And this was NBC. NBC did and so this is why Americans don't really know what to think because they're hearing this, media propaganda.
Well, mainstream media will always beat war drums. That's like, who was it? Brian Williams, was all getting off on rockets being blown at. It's really absurd. And none of these people, I don't think, have ever served. And when you talk about a draft, to me, I think that if our Congress decides to do things like this, that their children and grandchildren need to be the first people to go. And until they're willing to do that, then obviously, if you're not willing to risk your own kids and grandchildren, then it's obviously not worthy of us all getting involved in.
Colleen, anybody who is not familiar with modern monetary theory and understanding the difference between macro and microeconomics in terms of how we have our own fiat currency and can print our own money, the reality is the national debt is something that is a term that has basically been used to convince us that our country is going broke. Now, what's happening is that our country is becoming too expensive to live in because the wealth gap is growing so exponentially. Inflation is killing working class people because when we print money, it goes to a very select portion of the population. And of course, the military industrial complex gets first dibs on what the Federal Reserve is going to dole out. Whereas, of course, we could be allocating that money domestically for things like universal health care, living wage, a 21st century clean energy grid. There are so many things that we could be doing to bettering the world, but the people who are pulling the levers of power are the ones that are completely destroying our economy. Now, they'll say that it's the federal debt that's the reason why this is happening, but the reality is the lack of balance in society is so obvious at this point in terms of the money's printed, who gets their hands on it, and who continues to suffer. It was no different than what was happening during COVID. Money was being printed, but of course, where was it going? You get your one $1,200 surplus check, you get one $600 surplus check, and then you figure out that there was an exorbitant amount of power players in society that were basically looting the treasury, if you will. So that's where more or less we are today. And that's what war is. War is a racket, as Smedley Butler so eloquently said. That is where we are today. And, you could be advancing society or you could be destroying society. And as Jen so often likes to say, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And I think the people who are, pulling the levers of power right now, they are hogs. There is no question. But as I often like to say, you can't drink oil and you can't eat money. And so if they think that they can continue doing this and that there isn't going to be a drastic shift in terms of the way this country operates, like you guys were saying, maybe they're going to do something with Tucker Carlson, maybe they're not. But I just think there's too many people now that they're just not willing to put up with this anymore. Now, how it's going to unfold, I don't know. We went from, as you suggested, Iraq just not having a draft to now we're fighting proxy wars with drone bombs instead of actually having soldiers there, but the cycle continues. And so we're not okay with our own citizens dying in war, but we're okay with Ukrainian citizens dying in war. See, that's okay. And I think we really need to get to that point where all war is bullshit, and let's just, start advancing as a society. I can hope, I can pray, I can dream. But obviously, you guys have been fantastic guests. And Greg, I just have to know, what is that mug? Because it looks like The Simpsons. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I was right. Okay. Well, Jen, who would appreciate that? You're on mute.
I was just saying Marvel Universe.
Yes. Well, Jen's husband is and her son are.
He's at a show today. My husband actually did a comic show today. Yeah, he has a business where they're selling comics now. This is the new side racket for them.
Very nice.
Let's escape into fantasy, and through Marvel, that is one of those ways that we can do that.
So, Greg, let me ask you, as somebody who's served in this, and what that's like now when you look back. Obviously, it's not what you thought it was back then, and you've come a long way. Like, I think a lot of people that we've had on the show that have served have realized that maybe it isn't what they thought it was. But where do you see this going at this point? Because while it's not Iraq at the time being, we're still everywhere. Like, we're everywhere. We have our tentacles in everything. And the truth is, it's for profit, whether it's resources or just the military industrial complex or whatever, it's for profit. And so what can people do? Like, how do we stop this from happening?
I think our best chance is to elect representatives who believe, or let me put it this way, to elect representatives who can answer the question, how much is enough? We have to be honest with ourselves, right? That I'm kind of a Hobbesian when it comes to this, right? That whether you like it or not, the man's state of nature is war, and we can debate this for ad nauseum, but power still matters in the international arena. The question I think that we haven't been wrestling with deeply enough, because it does get politicized, is how much is enough? Why is it that we don't see peace dividends after war's end? And I think part of the problem is that we're just not electing representatives who can speak on our behalf in a manner that is confident enough to withstand the inevitable, you don't believe in the security of my nation, so therefore you must be unpatriotic and hate veterans. We have to represent or elect representatives who are more courageous than what we have now, in terms of asking hard questions, of depoliticizing something that is inherently political. And I think that's the challenge, right? War is inherently political, and thus it gets politicized. I think the challenge for us as Americans is to engage in conversations and put pressure on our elected officials to have them be the adults in the room who can have honest debate and ask ourselves, how much is enough? We are not going to get rid of the U.S. Armed Forces. It's just not going to happen. But what we can do, I think, is limit the scope, as you mentioned, Jen. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but I think it's close to 200, or it's well over 100, 150, states, nations where U.S. military forces are operating. And I clearly think that there are some dividends to be gained by spending less on defense. And we should ask ourselves, why are we spending so much on defense and yet we still feel insecure? And those are questions that we're just not confident and comfortable having right now. I don't think our current moment of hyperpolitization in our political community today is helping any. And that's an additional challenge. But, I think it's folks like you are trying to get the word out, and ultimately translating conversations like this onto pressure to elected officials who are then, again, comfortable, confident, and courageous enough to have more deep conversations about the limits and potential utility or assumed utility of war to our present and future.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about that, yeah, there's courage involved. I can say that there is. But what we're really talking about from a practical and logistical standpoint is electing representatives that are not on the payroll of the military industrial complex. And not just that, but I've said it a million times, like our representative will sit there and, go all high and mighty and sanctimonious because she doesn't take NRA money. No, she takes money from Raytheon, and she takes money from Big Pharma, and she takes money from all these other nefarious things, which then just condones the overall premise of buying our Congress. And so it's like when we talk about, it's the courage to be able to do it without being on the corporate dole. And that is what we need in representatives, because I truly believe that all of these things we discuss on this show are kind of moot as long as we have a Congress that's bought by corporate America. Like that, we have to get back to having a functioning republic. And when we do that, we will, I do believe, have a majority rule situation. I think if you get the corporate money out, then inevitably you'll get people that are representing their constituents, or they wouldn't get reelected if you're not taking corporate dollars. So, I mean, that's what I think the biggest thing is. And until you get enough people that are not making money from Raytheon sitting there, it's never going to end. Like, it's just never going to end.
Yeah. And again, that's hard to do because the lobbying effort is in and of itself a major, a major effort, right? That you're contesting against.
If you've ever been to the National Mall and you walk the 2+ mile perimeter that surrounds the U.S. Capitol, and you happen to see a suit walking in the street, because that's all you see in that area, odds are that suit is a corporate lobbyist. That's the most common profession of the workaday person who is not an elected member of the federal government. Happens to just be somebody who's lobbying on behalf of, let's say, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics. Yeah. That's their job. And why is it their job? Because it pays really effing well.
Well, it's effective. But see, I don't actually have a problem with lobbyists, and I don't have a problem with people meeting with lobbyists. I have a problem with people doing favors and taking money from lobbyists. And that's I actually went to law school to be a lobbyist. So I don't have a problem with the concept of it. You need people that are experts on issues to come in and help. Congress people can't possibly be experts on all of those things. So you do need people from those industries that represent those industries to come in and speak on behalf of their group. That's democracy. I don't have a problem with that. The problem is when there's favors and money exchange. Mm-hmm. The problem is when they're the reason you get reelected because they buy your campaign. That's the problem. I don't mind people coming in and talking about bills. I think that's great. We should all talk about that stuff. So I always try to get Peter to remember, I'm not anti-lobbyist. I'm anti-lobbyist giving money. Like that shouldn't be a thing.
It's corporate lobbying.
Education. Yeah.
Yep. I've been there and done that. And that's the whole problem with trying to elect. And even the good ones, the anti-war congresspersons, Dennis Kucinich, Ron Paul, Tulsi Gabbard, they're pushed out because they aren't viable. They aren't viable. I would say some hope now lies in the fact that we just saw Ron Paul, Dennis Kucinich, and some of the other people that have said, we're going to be bipartisan on this. We're going to be anti-war and have people from the right, the Tucker Carlson group. I mean, all of the people from everything in between, and not be siloed inside of our own political ideology. If you want to be anti-war, I ran as a Democrat. I'm actually kind of embarrassed now. I ran as a Democrat in 2005 to 2006. I did that because I thought the problem was the Bush-Cheney starting the Iraq War. That's why I thought this was okay. Well, then Obama and then Biden come in and they're doubling down on it. So I think the key is for us to get a wider movement and let some of these other issues to the side, and then try to stop the imperialism and the foreign policy, because it's blowing back. It's blowing back in all kinds of costs to us directly. And I think if people understand that their interests are involved, even the suicide rate, I mean, everything in the mass shootings, all the police shootings, all of these things are part of the blowback from 20 some years of perpetual war. But people don't get it because we think, oh, no draft, no taxes, no casualties.
Colleen, before we go, I just want to know, can you explain to the audience exactly what the Minnesota Labor Farmer Party is and what that actually, I mean, it seems like it's like an extension of the Democratic Party, which I'm sure it is.
Sounds like the Grange. I think it's cool.
I think it seems cool on paper, but could you just explain a little bit more about what that's all about and how that works?
Well, I'm not the best expert, but there's a whole long history that goes back to the 20s and the 30s where there were actually accusations of communism because the Democrat Farmer Labor Party began as kind of this more of a socialist effort. And if you go back it's not McCarthy. There were actually a professor at the University of Minnesota that had communist ties, etc. But it persists as a name. It's really a name only now. Democrat Farmer Labor now is basically just the Democrat Party. But its history was quite a bit different, and it was quite radical, and it was a little more on the socialist because the farmers at the time, we have public television's history about this. And I've watched it. It's very interesting. But they were getting together and trying to form unions and stuff so that they wouldn't be squashed. And this all goes back many, many years ago. And we like the name Democrat Farm. There actually are. I don't think there's that many farmers left in Minnesota. There's more in Iowa now. But and it's big farms. So they're part of the corporate problem. There's hardly any family farmers left.
Oh,
yeah. We've covered a lot of that. We've done episodes on regenerative agriculture and all of that. And we've even had a friend of mine who runs a very large grass-fed beef business in this country. And we've talked a lot about this. And the big four have definitely ruined everything.
Yes, definitely support local small businesses of every kind. As our good friend who is in Wisconsin, the big farm companies love their corporate welfare that squashed small town farmers. And so, like I said, the system's really bad. But as we often like to say on this show, we try to cross-pollinate and connect with as many people as possible. We've had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of veterans and people who have worked in the intelligence community who can talk directly about the fact that our paranoia is not paranoia. It's very real. Our country is run by basically a shadow government that you can't see and you can't touch. And it's been that way for quite a while. But the more the people coalesce together, the more we have these conversations, the more people are fully aware of how the war racket really works, how the government really is hand in glove with corporate special interests and has been for quite a while. The more we can, as Greg, you put so eloquently, we need to elect representatives who are not bought and paid for by corporate special interests. It is not complicated. If they are funded by the likes of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, the General Dynamics, and the like, then you know that no matter what they say, it's what they do and will do, which will not serve the American people. And that is more important than I think anything else. Final thoughts, anything you guys want to mention before you go, anything you may be working on? We really enjoyed this conversation this evening.
The only thing I'm going to end with is I just saw that movie, Don't Look Up.
Great movie.
Yeah, and it is a paradigm for nuclear war. And I'm like posting this all the time because the truth is we're in this similar to World War I where the world is splitting. And unfortunately, with the nuclear bomb, I keep writing to people, if Hitler, when he was losing and he's in his bunker and they're all going to commit suicide, if he had the nuclear button, we wouldn't be here. Probably. I mean, and so the more desperate you get, the more likely you are to believe. It's crazy to believe you can use a tactical nuke, but they are actually contemplating this stuff. And, this ends the world. So I think it's the number one thing. And of course, this is something where people's interests, we all have an interest. the end of the movie, of course, Meryl Streep thinks she's escaping on the rocket ship. But people they think they can go into their bunkers in Washington.
Well, some of them can. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and those guys might be fine in outer space. The idea that one of them might get eaten by one of those feathered reptilian things, that was very entertaining to me, because that's what I think will happen to somebody like Elon Musk.
I don't think the bunkers that they built, those luxury bunkers, I don't think any of them will even make it to their luxury bunkers. It just boosts their ability to come up with these crazy plans. And I think it's something that we need to really work on, telling people, nobody wants nuclear war.
Amen.
I think for me, Americans on both sides of the political aisle, or even if you're in the aisle itself, we need to start having more honest conversations about our relationship with war. We don't have those conversations enough. And I go back to a 1930s book on strategy by a British theorist, B.H. Liddell Hart, who said that the purpose of strategy ultimately should be a better state of peace. And I think that's what we should always keep in mind, that if we are going to decide to employ military force overseas, then we have to be damn well sure that applying that force will lead to a better state of peace, because our track record has not been all that good over the last, I would argue, 50 years or so. So we need to be more thoughtful about our relationship with war, about the faith we have in war, and about our commitment to making a better future state of peace.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on this evening. Again, Colleen, Rowley, Greg, Daddis, thank you for what you do. It takes a lot of courage to speak out against these very powerful entities in our society, but you guys are doing a great job, and we always welcome our veterans on our podcast. I am sure that will be plenty of opportunity going forward to continue the conversation, and we thank you very much for coming on this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You didn't tell me we were getting like all new veterans. Like normally we have some of the same people.
Well, had to mix it up.
No, it's good.
That was definitely a welcome addition. But yeah, so we'll see what happens tomorrow.
So it's funny we talk about the peace thing, because today when I was at the Glass Museum, in the gift shop, they had like stuff from a bunch of different artists. And I always kind of like to support the little artist things. And I bought this because it was like there were a bunch of different ones. And this one was the one, I don't know if you could see it. It's like a tree.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so there's a tree on one side. And the quote on this one on the back says, "Peace comes from within one's soul." Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really cool. So like it's sort of like a talisman. So it was just interesting when we're talking about peace just now. And I'm thinking it comes from within one's soul. And we are a very unpeaceful people.
Oh, we're extremely unpeaceful.
And I think that, and it goes way beyond just the profit thing. That's on the big scale. But on the personal scale, like we're not at peace.
No, but I do think that the American people are getting restless, and that's
maybe people are tired of fighting for scraps.
I would be. I know I wouldn't do it, but hey, it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow if Trump does get indicted. Obviously, that'll be a topic of conversation. But
see, and all of that to me, it's like, why? Again, people, it's just more media circus. The bottom line is, unless whatever happens keeps him from running, which I don't think it does. My understanding is it doesn't have it right. So it's not going to impact him on running. So then who cares at this point?
This is what
it's like we're so like the fact that
you're trying to indict
for 2 years and they're still trying to. It's like it won't matter.
If you're indicting him because of hush money, it's like you're not even. It's so obvious how broken this system is and how stupid this is. If you're going to indict him over this, if no one wants to talk about what Jared Kushner has been doing, acting as you talk about Hunter Biden is a proxy for Joe Biden and Ukraine and China. And Jared Kushner is a proxy for Donald Trump and the Saudi royal family. It's like the real crux of these things, the real crimes that are committed.
Colanello, we never hold anyone accountable. If we held people accountable, the past 4 administrations would be in tried for war crimes. So the fact that they're going after Trump for what they're going after him for, again, he's filthy my whole life. I don't recall a time when he probably couldn't have been indicted, whatever. And I get it. It's gross. But the reality is,
nothing's going to come of this.
Well, not just that, but people, it's like, I look at this and we're just had this whole conversation about like warfare. He's the only president that we've had in forever that hasn't started a war. As much as I don't like him, people, because I really don't like him. But you know, what they're going to indict him on is sort of like, it's really just not the point. And unless it keeps him from running, what's the point? I don't get it.
And do me
want
a favor.
Us to have go on to talk about Ukraine and Trump being indicted because why? You agree with his position? So you want
obviously no, dirtbag leftist likes to say that because he likes to talk down to you and basically suggest that, you know, Bo knows more than you and you should just listen.
Bo knows way more than me. Oh, yes, I wouldn't argue with that. And I'm freaking, I hear you. Bo knows way more than me. But that doesn't mean that we view from the same lens as terms of our levels of cynicism are slightly different. I am infinitely more cynical than Bo is.
Sure.
And double
K, and double K, this is not about Hunter's financial compensation. This is about what type of illicit deals were being done behind the scenes between mega powers that shouldn't have been done. And this is no different than Jared Kushner getting $2 billion from the Saudi royal family. They're all filthy, corrupt sons of bitches.
I just feel like we're so far past this. We're so far past this now, guys.
And if you're going, and why not indict Trump over pay to play with the Saudi royal family? Because that's real.
Well, there are definitely much more important things that we could be indicting him on. But again, I will go back to this. What happens then? Just because you get an indictment, you're still miles away from a conviction, and none of those things is going to preclude him from running again. And if he runs and he wins, then all of those things sit on the back burner anyway. So I guess I just don't understand what the point of all of this is, other than Trump loves it because it's just media spotlight for him. It's a circus.
And not only that, but you talk about felonies that are committed. You know how many felonies Hillary Clinton committed with that server in her house?
You know how many felonies Hillary Clinton's probably committed since breakfast?
It's just, but that's, listen, making statements like that, quite frankly, are very stupid on your part.
I'm just saying, it's like if we're going to count felonies.
No, you know what? We need to be taking this seriously because there are people out there who think, no, what you have to understand is that they want to go after Trump because they want to shut down whatever loudmouth is out there that's going to occasionally say the wrong thing about the empire, because that's their concern. They're just concerned about him saying something really stupid. They don't really give a damn what his crime is. They just want to shut him up. But there's also a part of me who's like, well, if you're going to go after him on this, I'm almost wondering, are you actually trying to convict him? Are you just trying, to make him an even bigger deal than he was before? I mean, there is such an apparatus of people in our system that make so much money off of him that I can't really take this seriously. They want to have a villain like him to talk about. They want to be able to, Thank
you to Hillary Clinton for that very effective Pied Piper strategy. That sure did work.
The Malcolm Nances of the world who need to get paid to sell another book about how, I'm going to so-and-so and I'm going to find out all the crimes that Trump has committed with Putin. And it's like, we have no living wage. We have no universal health care. Our environment is completely destroyed. Let's drill in the Arctic because that's really smart. The fact that the Willow Project got the green light and that's not being talked about over and over and over again. There are no heroes here.
Well, that's like when we talk about these things that are real important things. Okay, like what happened in East Palestine is really important. Whether or not Trump gets indicted isn't as important in terms of what it will actually have an impact on. People who are dying from toxic poisoning, that's real. whether or not Trump is indicted will have zero impact on the lives of the people in this country. Zero.
Double
Zero.
K, Hillary Clinton set up a private server in her home as a government official and ran an email system through it, which included the Clinton Foundation. That is illegal, and I can't even begin to describe how many laws were broken through the process of what she did. You know, when they talk about her scrubbing her server, this is what they're talking about. These are the federal crimes that she committed, and committed them repeatedly, and nothing ever came of it. And she couldn't even get a slap on the wrist. And part of the reason they couldn't do anything is because of the efforts that Debbie Wasserman Schultz made behind the scenes to make sure that the DNC was drained of funds completely, so that Clintons could come in and completely finance the financial coffers, or fill the financial coffers, so that way they completely take over the party. They were never going to let Bernie Sanders get that nomination. They didn't care if she committed these crimes. They were going to whitewash it all the way to the election. And you can say that, well, you know, they did what they could to make sure that the crimes were called out in October. That may have swayed people to vote for Trump. Bottom line, we have a completely corrupt system, completely corrupt. The few people that are good are seldom ever seen to make a true impact. I think that Trump is guilty of a lot of things. I just don't think what they're going to arrest him for is going to go very far. I just don't see it. And maybe I'm wrong. But I think that the backlash for this is going to be substantial.
They just it's almost like they want to martyr him. He's like a living martyr, and they just keep doing it. They just keep setting it up. And it's really like he would never be able to be so successful without the help of the Democrats. They really do him such a good service in all of their shenanigans. They make him look so much better because they just look so bad. And I still don't see what the point of this is unless it could somehow see. I always thought that all of these ideas and indictment possibilities was just basically their way of figuring out to keep him from running again. But this doesn't keep him from running. So I don't understand why the circus.
You're right, Double K. I haven't. I'm simply telling you that I'm well aware of what the law stated at the time regarding having a private email server set up in her home as a government official, as Secretary of State.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that.
And Jen's an attorney. So do me a favor. Like, I know that I'm not trying to say that Trump is innocent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying that we have to be objective about the fact that if we're going to really go after these real crimes, we have to go after the ones that really make an impact.
Oh my God, Off Rail, you're grossing me out. You're grossing me out talking about her hair and Joe Biden.
Yeah, stop that. And I'm not trying to throw this back at Hillary and say, and let me tell you, if Trump does get indicted, Hillary is going to be dancing and being very loud, very vocal about this happening.
I still don't see to what end this goes. It's like, what? This man has been impeached twice. And you think that an indictment of whatever they're going to do, like, there is no bigger thing than being impeached, basically. And he did it twice.
Yeah. And so again, I agree with, I think it was what Colinello said, that he is being indicted because he used campaign funds to pay off Stormy Daniels. And I have no doubt it's true. I'm sure he did. And again, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of what is really going to have a significant impact on the results of whether Trump continues to run, he will.
That's the only thing that matters.
I think if they went after Trump for his involvement with the Saudis and using Jared Kushner, the fact that Jared Kushner's own effing father went to federal prison for financial crimes and his own son is doing the same damn thing, only at an even bigger level, is unbelievable. That's the fact that that's not being prosecuted is amazing. It just
look, they got Al Capone on income tax evasion. I mean, that's what happens. But at this point, I just feel like why are you indicting someone that's been impeached twice and still nothing has happened to him? The ship sailed, people. Unless you can keep him from running again, I don't see it. But
we'll give it to you the next time we're on the show. We love having you here, Double K, and there's nothing wrong with having a little banter back and forth. But I'm surprised you're defending Hillary Clinton.
She's not. She just wants you to be able to be accountable for when you say things, which I agree, but I don't remember exactly what the law was or the code.
No, I think what the law is, and again, I'm not a lawyer. From what I remember, I think when you're a government official, when you're a federal government official, especially when I don't know if you're legally allowed to have a personal email while you're a federally elected official, but I think all correspondence that is government related has to go through your .gov email when you're in federal office. There's something to that effect. I don't know what the exact law is.
The only reason, Colin Ellis says the only reason he's running is to deflect the court cases against him. I think that's good strategy, but I think he runs because he's just a narcissist personality disorder and loves to be the center of attention. Running is what he likes. He doesn't want to be the president, really. He loves running for president. He loves campaigning. He loves having rallies.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah,
he loves the circus. He doesn't love the work.
He doesn't want to
actually be president.
Yeah, he doesn't want to govern. And again, people are really still underestimating DeSantis. It's really amazing how much.
Well, all that people really need to do is all you have to do is just be realistic about Joe. And then it really doesn't matter who else is on the other side of the ticket. It doesn't really matter who's on the other side of the ticket.
Yeah,
our side is losing.
Yeah, with the rate that the Dems are going right now, it's going to be very bad. But look, this is all the more reason why, if we were an engaged nation, if we were very much like, let's say, the French, who the second anything happens in their nation, they put their yellow vests on and get right to work.
You've got my yellow vest.
I do. You see, that's a big difference. We don't have that right now. Wish we did, but we don't. With that said,
they also have social safety net and healthcare, so that when people do take off from work in a strike, they also have generally better respect for labor in most of those countries and have much stronger unions and or higher minimum wages.
So with that said, we appreciate you guys.
What do we have coming up?
On Wednesday, we have Bright Green Lies, your people that are...
they're not my people. They're our people. Guys, the book, Bright Green Lies, highly recommend. We will be speaking with a couple of the authors on Wednesday. It's very, very important. It's very disturbing. I'm not going to say it isn't. And it really is. It's hard for people that really want things to stay all industrialized to not feel defeatist. But I think it's an important conversation. It's definitely very uncomfortable, but we're going to have it on Wednesday. What else do we have coming up?
We will have, apparently, Nikki Fried will join us next Monday. And we're having Kevin Gostola back on the show, guys. I believe is on next Monday as well. Yeah, talking about his new book, which I'm hoping is there when I get home. And when do you get back? I get back on Thursday. Okay. So, solid show. Our channel is growing, guys, believe it or not. We're just completely shadow banned when it comes to our live streams. We are. Guys, we are going to be putting out our first, we're going to be having our first Gen Z report on Thursday night. We're going to do it at 9. It's going to be a Thursday night at 9 show going forward. Our first episode. And this is going to be somewhat of a trial and error thing for us figuring it out. But we're going to be on, and we'll start out with the Gen Z group and start out kind of moderating and basically allowing them to learn how to do their own show on the channel. And then hopefully they'll just sort of be doing it on their own. But yeah, so look for that on Thursday night, and share some love with these kids that are going to be trying to get their own show off the ground here. Absolutely. Remember to smash. Do we all rumble? Do we rumble? No, but I officially started our Substack today. So we're going to be writing some stuff. Be on the lookout for that. Well, and no, we could also do video on Substack. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it can be video on Substack now.
Should probably put up a clip with Matt Taibbi on there. That'd be good.
Look, I set it up. I gave you the password. Go beef it up however you want to. I don't know.
Yeah, of course, because it's my job to do that.
No, it's not about job. It's about capability of finding somebody that can do it well. Like I can set up an account, but for me to sit there and try to figure out the platform and all of that and the interface, it'll take me hours when somebody
Ben, you'll help me with that.
What?
Yeah, Ben will help me with that.
Okay. Oh, hi, Ben.
Go to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month. You can become a supporter of our wonderful show. You get the Lulu sticker as a starter item. But of course, if you're a $10 a month subscriber, you get the Mansion Parliamentarian sticker to go with it. So what do you know? You definitely want these two babies. And of course, if you're feeling extremely generous, $25 a month will get you the Tri-Blend t-shirt, which I am not wearing right now, but I think no, I don't have one with me right now.
You guys have seen the jersey a million times.
You know you want one. It's really awesome. And we are obviously very grateful for any and all contributions that you guys make to our wonderful channel. Again, a special shout out to Double K and Danny Wyndham, who chipped in combined $40 for the podcast tonight. Every dollar counts. It really means a lot. If you are feeling like you do want to contribute, but you don't want to put your credit card on the grid, please go over to Cash App, $Gen Change.
You know, we looked at Rumble. I think my thoughts on Rumble is that for a channel that has a really good, sizable audience that is looking for a way to not have the same censorship issues, it makes sense. For a lot of the people that I know that have moved on to Rumble, they had fairly big platforms that they moved with them. We're small. So the idea of kind of starting over on Rumble just doesn't necessarily make sense to us. I think, like, I don't know.
No, we're doing good with our YouTube shorts, and that's what's allowing us to grow. Hopefully more people will eventually tune in and we'll get better numbers. Again, the problem that we have is that without question, our live stream is shadow banned because we can never, even with these growing numbers, we have increased, believe it or not, guys, I believe over the course of the past week and a half, 2 weeks, not even, we have gotten an additional 700 subscribers to our channel. So we are growing, and yet it's not translating into live views. So if you need further proof that this show is shadow banned, I don't know what
it's so weird to me because I'm not I feel like I'm perceived as having, or we're perceived as having infinitely more power than we do. It's weird. Like, of all the things to be threatened by in terms of like the deep state, I should not be anywhere that would even be on their radar. And yet the fact that we would be shadow banned, which I'm still not sure what that phrase even really means. But
well, it just means that you will not come up in the algorithm. No matter what you say or do, it's like you need a guest that's going to get it out there that a lot of people want to see. And then eventually they find their way to our channel. Maybe they click the bell, maybe they don't. Maybe they're subscribed, maybe they're not. As Colinello says, as Double K says she shares, Colinello says YouTube is suspect. Yes, it's very suspect. But it's still the platform that we know. And even though live streams don't really do it in terms of numbers, our clips, relatively speaking, do pretty well, and our shorts do very well. So we're going to continue doing that.
Yeah, you won't get notified. But you know what, Metalopoly, that's been a problem that like the left YouTubers have been talking about forever. I mean, Jordan's been talking about that forever.
So there you go. I mean, there's further proof that this thing is a joke. And all you can do is just remind it's almost like you need to put it on your phone. Yeah, we go live at 9 o'clock. And
you found a generational change on Rumble? Yeah, I thought we do have a page, right, Peter?
We do. We just don't, I mean, Ben drops some stuff on there from time to time. It's, we get a little activity, but it's nothing special. I mean, it's not like anybody's promoting us on there, and you need like exclusive content. But the truth is, we need to cross that. We're at almost, I think we're like 900 away at this point from 10,000. Maybe if we clear that plateau, that might make a difference. I don't know. But
if we get to that allows us to at least have a merch store.
Yes, so then we can work on that. So that's our goal for hopefully the rest of, figure the next month. We may be doing something for my 40th, which is on May 6th. That's a Saturday. So we'll do like a special type of live stream for that, and we'll promote it. Should probably start sooner rather than later, probably the beginning of April. So with that said, thank you guys. Always great.
But that means you're going to be like planning your own party.
Whatever. We'll see you Wednesday.
Bye, all.